Good evening and welcome to the July 16th, 2014 Town Board meeting. I'd ask that everyone please rise for the pledge tonight. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd ask our clerk to please call the roll.
Cole. Here. LaFountain.
Here.
Metzler. Here. Moore.
Here.
Quinn.
Here. I'm going to take the agenda out of order this evening. Instead of starting with communications and announcements, I will take public participation ahead of that because obviously there are a number of people in the audience wanting to speak to the board on a number of different items. So rather than sitting through communications and announcements, you always have the right to do that after. So we will start this evening with communications and announcements. So I'd ask our clerk to please read. There's a sign-in, and if you've signed in, we've got it. If you didn't sign in, that's okay. Once we've gone through all the sign-ins, then we will, in fact, get to your particular item after we've gone through all the sign-ins. And then once we've gone through all the sign-ins, we'll give everybody an opportunity to speak once before we speak multiple times. So with that, I'd ask our clerk to please call the first person that would like to address the board under public participation.
Bernie Knofel.
Good evening, Bernie.
Good evening. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm putting my 70th birthday ahead of this because I could be somebody else or someplace else right now. But I live at 247 Parkview. I've been there for 42 years. In that time, I've seen many changes. Irene Gossin was a person who fought for the environment around where we live. Right now, I think the issue happens to be Baker Commodities. I spoke with Bill down at Baker yesterday, and I'm a vegan. I don't eat meat. I find it very offensive that people are barbecuing in their backyards, and the odor from their barbecues are coming into my yard. I don't think this is right. I think it's on the scale of Baker Commodities, and I'm wondering if the town can do anything about people barbecuing in their backyards. Is there anyone who can answer that question for me?
Certainly, Bernie. I'm not sure if you were on a distribution list, email distribution list. I'm not sure.
Stop right there, Tony.
Yep.
There's an old saying that says, don't wish for something because you may wind up getting it. I'm not a vegan. I don't care what people do in their backyards. I've lived where I am right now for 42 years. In 42 years, I've smelled something maybe twice. Back in the 70s, when I first moved in, I smelled something, yeah. It wasn't really offensive to me. What it smelled like to me was somebody roasting coffee. And from what I understand, that's what it did smell like. It smelled like roasting coffee. And there's places you can go in Henrietta where you can smell roasting coffee. I can go down into the four corners of Penfield, down by Penfield Plaza, and I can smell Burger King. Do you think that's not offensive to some people who don't like the smell of burning flesh? I would say yes, it is. I'm not here to defend Baker Commodities, and I'm not here to go against my neighbors who are here to say that they are against it. The thing is, it's a business. It was there 100 years ago. It was there before we moved into the neighborhood. And I think a lot of people who move into urban communities think that they can rule what's there before they come there. If I moved into a community where there was a cow person who raised cows for milk, and he was out on a Monday morning spreading his manure, have any of you ever been past a farm where there's a manure spreader going on a daily basis? Is it a pleasant smell? Where do you think you get your milk from? These people at Baker Commodities supply a service. They take care of the deer that are killed on the roads in Penfield. They don't have to do what I found out. They do it as a service to Penfield, and they service another 16 towns around here. The tallow and everything that comes out of what they service goes for biofuel to help you heat your homes and drive your cars. Now, I'm not here to support what they do. The fact is, they supply and they do a service to this community. And they've been doing this service to the farmers and the people around here for over 100 years. And for someone to come into this community and say, I don't like the way it is, there's a lot of things that people don't like, but they have to live with them. It's a part of living, and it's a part of us surviving as human beings. What do people expect them to do with things? EPA says that they are within the rights and within their standards for what they're putting out as far as odors. I've lived there. I have not smelled anything. I have people that live 2-3 doors away from me. Maybe their noses are better than mine, but I haven't smelled a thing in the last 20 or 30 years. That's all I have to say, and good night.
Thank you, Bernie. Next item, please.
Jim Ebmeyer.
Hi,
I
Jim.
live at 2020 Baird Road, across from the community center. I've been there for 48-plus years. And I support the town board's efforts to make the town of Penfield a enjoyable place to live and visit, and to control the cost of government. So in that vein, when Baird Road was being resurfaced between Wayland and Atlantic Avenue back in June, I sent an email to the Department of Public Works about a pothole in southbound Baird Road, along where that softball field is on the high school property just south of the community center, suggesting that they send a member of the highway department down there with a bucket of asphalt and a shovel and a tamper and fill it up. It never happened. The pothole's there. They'll gradually get bigger and bigger. It's already about 13 by 13, be it an irregular shape and 3 inches deep. So you can imagine how that's going to progress. It could have been filled for no cost. But the Department of Public Works didn't do that. I have the email, which I sent, if you're interested in that. But just a comment. There are things that can be done to maintain the roads or whatever it is, and for free, if we take advantage of it, especially when people in the community point these things out as an opportunity. And if that pothole ever gets fixed, it'll probably be something we have to lay out money for to do it. So anyway, that's my comment. I think it's disappointing that the DPW did not take the opportunity. The asphalt was there already for free. Send somebody down a half a mile from where they were doing the other paving job. It'd take them 20 minutes to fill it up, but
Tamp it now.
didn't happen.
So I'd welcome that, Jim,
Certainly.
if you've got the email. Thank you. And I will close that back after I speak with DPW. Thank you. We've got a number of paving jobs going on, so hopefully a shovel full here on one of the jobs will save going out and
Well,
extra cost.
the day they finished the final surface on that section of Baird Road, there was a pile of stuff along by the cemetery that had, and cleaning up the equipment, here's this little pile of stuff. I almost went with a bucket of my own to get it and take it down there and fill up the hole, but it started to rain, so I didn't do it.
Got it.
And when I measured the size of the hole yesterday, there was water in it. Obviously, you can't fill something like that, there's water in it, but still, anyway.
Well,
Thank
Jim,
you.
it doesn't mean
Thank
that,
you, Jim.
Jim, it doesn't mean that someone cannot come back. Actually, this past week, I assisted a resident on Jackson Road near the country club, similar situation, and it's been rectified. So we'll make sure we look into this.
Yeah, and again, we're all suffering potholes through this last winter. It's terrible for that. And the state highway department's probably never going to patch up some of these things. Penfield Road down, particularly the 2-lane section, well, the 4-lane section is horrible, has been for years, but
Right.
there are all kinds of potholes on the rest of Penfield Road, State Highway. We'll bump over those for months, I'm sure.
Got it. Thanks, Jim. Thank you.
Alice Sokolow.
Hello, Doctor.
Hello. I'm here tonight to question your 14T 135, making a determination of completeness for the South Point Marina expansion. I'm glad that you had a scoping and that you included public participation and interagency participation on May 7th, 2014. But your resolution tonight is not consistent with that ENB of May 7th. First off, your resolution tonight has the address 1384 Empire Boulevard when the project is located, according to the ENB, at 1384 and 1420 Empire Boulevard. Secondly, your clubhouse under the resolution has 3,750 square feet, and for the ENB, which was the public notice, and the interagency government notice was 2,700 square feet. And I know you explained that to have a hearing later, but that does not change the public input and the interagency input that did not occur. Next, in your resolution, you include a restaurant. In your ENB, you said seasonal dining area. In your resolution, you have no pool. In the positive deck, in the ENB, you have a swimming pool. There are too many inconsistencies between your ENB announcement, which is the formal interagency announcement, and the public participation, and what you have made as your resolution for tonight. And in terms of that, I can think of one thing. I'll make it short. I was going to go through what scoping is and definition and everything, but I'm sure you're aware of that. The one significant thing that I can see immediately with the restaurant situation is that 1440 Empire Boulevard was 26 acres to begin with. It was divided up into 10 and 16. The 16 had a Brownsfield remediation. The 10, which involves the restaurant, had just the spills cleaned up. And when I asked Matt Gillette of the DEC, was it safe, he didn't answer. So, because they just cleaned up containers, they did not say that the whole area was evaluated as a Brownsfield. So putting a restaurant on there may have other impacts that I cannot determine at this point, that the public didn't have, nor the agencies had the ability to give input into. And not only that, but your other development, South Point Cove Apartments, the 9 apartments now have a 10th one outside of the resolution that's going to include a pool also. So are we having two pools, one pool, or what's going on here? And not only that, but the condominiums and the ownership of that 1.5 is not clear if the condominium owners are going to own that pool and whether the other 9 buildings will be allowed to participate in it, or how they're going to be charged, or on what basis, and how this is going to conflict with another pool if there is a pool. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Mike Kemp Schneider.
Hi, I'm Mike Kemp Schneider. I live at 291 Parkview Drive. I'm here about the bigger commodity issue. I don't think anybody that I've spoken to have any desire for Baker to shut down, not have as many folks work there. Whether my nose is as good as somebody else's, I'm not going to argue that. It seems like this wasn't an issue we lived there 14 years, the first 6 years, it hasn't been an issue. We live next door to where Linda grew up, what's transpired is Bob Reed has come here and spoken to you guys for years and been treated well and not so well, and almost been, it seems to me, been treated as if he's, shooting at a windmill. I can't think of he hasn't been given the respect and been treated with the seriousness of all of our concern. So what I guess my concern is, I guess the first one is that you guys had a meeting. It would have been really nice if there was more transparency at that meeting, and that it seems in good faith that you would have invited a neighborhood member to be part of that meeting that you had. I really don't know why that wasn't done, and I'd really be interested in hearing what the thinking was behind that.
I have 12 to 15 meetings each week with different agencies and organizations, and I do that either with members of the staff and myself. And so that's a routine thing that is done. I've met with DEC and Baker, DEC individually, Baker individually, and that was a meeting that on some regular basis we get together, and we did get together. And if you didn't get a copy of my email that I sent out to a group, and I highlighted the discussion that was had at that meeting last Wednesday.
And I guess what I would say is, because the trust is iffy, your communication to us, we may not see it as the whole scoop. And it would be great if we were included in the discussion, given that there's been a number of us that have been talking about this for a while. I don't think the issue is that Baker can't do what they need to do. I think that and you guys have said, yeah, there is a problem. That's the most recent email that I heard from you, Tony, is that there is a problem. They know there's a problem. We know that they have the capacity to eradicate it, yet it isn't. And that's what we go around and around. And I don't know if I feel insulted by it. I don't know what the word is for it. It just seems to be a profit margin thing, is all I can figure, is that whatever switch they need to turn on or whatever they need to do to keep the air reasonable over the course of time, they don't do. Because there are times at night where it isn't something that you smell every 20 years. It's something that you smell horrifically regularly. So there are people that are way more articulate than me that can speak to this. I don't think that because Baker was there before us that we don't have a right to say the quality of our life's not important. And I think my kids deserve to walk outside and smell clean air. We haven't even talked about the chemicals that are emitted, and I don't know about those. I'd be speaking out of ignorance. But I'm saddened by how long this has gone on, and it makes me lose faith in you guys and the process. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike.
Bob Reed.
Hi, Bob.
Hi, Tony. I'm Bob Reed, 275 Parkview Drive. And I'm here, and quite a few of us are here tonight to present a petition by neighbors in our neighborhood, Parkview Drive, Old Westfall Road, Reg Circle, Woodhaven, the western Penfield area. Petition calls for actions to address odors from the Baker Commodities rendering plant at 2268 Browncroft Boulevard in the Irondequoit Creek Valley. 136 neighbors have signed it. Many of them are people who never, ever issued an odor complaint. People I didn't even know personally, but I'd knock on their door and they'd welcome me in. And two places, they put a glass of wine in my hand and said, "Sit down, will you, and tell us more about this, because we smell it and we haven't complained about it, but it's pretty unpleasant." And I want to underline that it's not at catastrophic levels. It's not at the levels that Linda grew up with, or that were there 3 days after I moved in 1986, where we had to cancel our 4th of July picnic and move it inside. For the most part, it's not like that. But it's there, and at times it is really bad. My birthday, my 67th birthday, and I didn't get a card from you, Tony. I was really hurt.
I was hoping that's not the only reason that the comment was made about disrespecting, because I can't think of a time since I've been in office that you have been disrespected. And if that's the case, I'll get a belated card, Bob.
Okay,
So,
thank
I
you. That would
apologize.
help. That would help. It's tough to be 67. But I went out about 9 o'clock, and it was the old, unfiltered, untreated stench that we used to have on a regular basis. And I sent out a note to the neighbors, I said, if you're trying to sleep with your windows open tonight, give this a good sniff. And the next day, a family from around the corner with 5 children, they said, we hadn't smelled it before last night, but we were running all around our house trying to figure out where it was coming from. They thought there was a dead cat in the yard or something like that. So I want to emphasize that for the most part, it's not at catastrophic levels, but we don't feel that we should have to wait for it to be at catastrophic levels when we know that for 8 years there was near perfection in odor control from 1997 to the very end of 2004. Our entire odor reporting network, which was pretty finely tuned after the catastrophe of odors in 97, it simply fell apart, in 96. It fell apart after 97, 98, 99. There was nothing to report, and we were ready to pounce. 96 had been such a miserable summer. You know some of the details, Tony, the hundreds of thousands of pounds of material that sat in trucks in the sun down there.
700 complaints, if my memory serves me correct.
I've seen 400 to 800, but somewhere right in there, huge number. And there was we filled this auditorium with neighbors on that occasion. I think you were on the board at that time, yes. So we had no odor reporting network in 2005 when the odors came back. And we all thought they're going to get it under control. It's going to go back to the way it was. But by 2006, it hadn't. So let me get to my prepared text here. But I wanted to underline that and it doesn't smell to any of us that I know of, with all due respect to Mr. Nofurl, it doesn't smell like roasting coffee to me. I'd take that any day. It's a pretty awful odor, and you've been, I think, at the plant when they've been operating, and it's nothing that's very enjoyable. So let me cut to the chase here. In 2006, we began to keep a database. By 2012, the town's development director, Jim Costello, told us that the number of complaints for 2011 were not of significance to the town. And Tony at the meeting didn't contradict him. Odor complaints for 2012 doubled those for 2011. Odor complaints for 2013 doubled those of 2012. And so far this year, in 2014, we have over 85 from a very small reporting group. We've already exceeded all of last year, so we're on our way to double again. Okay, it's very clearly gotten worse in the last year and a half. The plant maintains, however, as its performance has declined, that it's constantly improving and adjusting odor controls. Neither the DEC nor the town has taken action on odor complaints, and it seems to us as if they believe that the number is still insignificant. Before I review the petition items, I want you to imagine yourselves where we're sitting down here. Switch places with us in your mind. Your residents experiencing worsening odor problems, and you're appealing to your fellow residents and neighbors, however not close neighbors, for help. You've been coming and asking for help for 9 years. In the course of 6 or 7 appearances and more than 20 meetings with 2 supervisors, the DEC and the plant, your board has not announced or implemented any plan or policy to correct the problem. This despite the extra powers that New York State town law confers on towns to regulate rendering plants as noxious but necessary to civilization. The supervisor has ignored several requests even to gather more information about the problem. The current supervisor didn't reply to even one of 40 consecutive odor complaints after he took office and was briefed on the problem. 18 months of silence. As far as I know, individual board members have offered you residents not a single word of sympathy or support or empathy. They haven't contacted you or others who have experienced the odors that have ruined dinner parties, awakened several people from a deep sleep, affected outdoor activities, or just made unpleasant a cup of coffee on the deck, an early morning, or a late evening walk. And in the midst of all of this, you find out three very upsetting things. Number one, that soon after the odors returned after an 8-year absence, the plant and its manager began contributing substantial sums to the board's political party, and in one case to the supervisor's campaign fund. And they didn't stop until you residents brought it up at a board meeting. You're aware that it's perfectly legal, but the term is an uncomfortable feeling to it. You further discover that the town has a confidential agreement with the plant, and it won't reveal it, claiming that it can't be found. And finally, you're astounded to discover that a particularly heavy outbreak of odors was because the plant didn't follow its own protocols, apparently putting profit ahead of odor control. Your calls for heavy fines if the plant does it again is ignored. The supervisor appears to turn his back on all the suggestions you residents have made and says the town will take no action, including gathering more information. And soon afterwards, he unilaterally disbands the stakeholder meetings residents had attended for 18 months. Then, as Baker continues to beat the drum of upgrades and improvements, the odors dramatically worsen in duration and intensity. You begin to mount a petition drive in hopes of showing broad resident support for action. It takes months to formulate something you all can agree on, and more months to carry it around the neighborhood repeatedly. It gets terrific support even from people who have never actually filed a complaint after smelling the odors. As you prepare to present the petition with its 136 signatures, the supervisor calls a meeting of the company, the DEC, and the town, the three groups that you were part of when you were having stakeholder meetings, the causer of the odors, and the two government entities that have so far failed to find a fix for it or demand a fix to the problem. You're astonished that you are excluded from this meeting because you have attended so many with the plant, the DEC, and the town. Emails are sent to request that the residents be included and for it to be delayed until a petition and its formula for action are presented, which we're doing tonight. Both requests are ignored without explanation. I will get to the brief report that we got from Supervisor Tony just yesterday in a moment. But right now, I want to ask you, you don't have to answer, but how are you feeling about your board and supervisor that you've been coming to for help and asking for help from? Are you feeling a bit patronized, abandoned, perhaps a little bit angry? Do you think it's right for a town to have a confidential agreement with the company it's supposed to regulate? Do you wonder about the purpose of those contributions? Is the town trying to tell you that you are the problem and not Baker? Do you see a sad new meaning in Ronald Reagan's statement that government isn't the solution to the problem? It is the problem. Do you wonder why fellow residents and neighbors who are on the board appear to be indifferent to your problem, and by inaction enabling a corporation to foul your air and just leave you hanging in the wind, and a foul wind it can be? I'm sorry if this picture offends you. I'm not a confrontational person. I have been when I've been here before, but this is not easy for me to do. I'm telling you how it looks from down here. I'm trying to hold a mirror up for you to look into. You have complete power to change the image by acting on the petition signed by 136 residents of the area. This is a new opportunity, and we hope that you'll choose to move in a new direction, the direction of supporting people with lungs and noses, especially children, pregnant women, the frail elderly with COPD and asthma, who aren't likely to benefit from inhaling the cited 110 chemicals that is in rendering emission. So let's look at what the petition calls for, which I'll be handing to you in a minute. Number one, information gathering. A survey of all the neighborhoods surrounding the plant. Our reporting group is rather small. Information seems to be important. Now, to contrast the fact that we could not interest Tony in doing a survey like this, for the sewer that seems to be important to the town, you have now done 3 surveys, 2 by postcard, and 1 that involved many hours of Mr. DeFrancesco's time going door to door in the neighborhood, trying to get, apparently, the approval rating up to a relatively good level. If you can do 3 for the sewer, you can do 1 on the odor system, on the odor problem. A third party, this is number 2, a third-party evaluation of odor controls at the plant. And here's where we discuss what Tony announced yesterday, a plan to deal with the problems. It seems to us that Tony has refused calls for action for years. But this plan, released just a little ahead of our petition, we believe is not reasonable or sensible. He's calling for the DEC to do another inspection and evaluation. And he's calling for Ashland Water Technologies to spend more time reevaluating the technology that they installed recently. These 2 groups have failed in the past. The DEC has done inspections for the whole 9 years that we've been coming to you, and as far as I know, they find everything is just fine. They're terribly understaffed and undermanned. They've had huge budget cuts. I'm not sure they're up to the job. They're not neutral. They have a dog in this fight, as I see it. There's a real possibility that if Baker is compelled to control odors at the level that we know they can control them at, using perhaps more expensive technology, they may just pick up and leave. And that's a catastrophe for everybody. Millions of pounds of animal carcasses, fats, and oils that need to be treated and recycled and used productively then would go to a landfill. Nobody wants that. So I'm not sure the DEC is a neutral party. Ashland Technologies, since they've been involved, things have gotten worse. And I think you were all here in this room last fall when the uniformed technologist from Ashland was here. And at the dais here, at the microphone, he was questioned, and he confessed that he had no idea what chemicals in the emissions were causing the odors. Now, this seemed like a striking admission to us, but no one questioned him about that on the board. If he doesn't know what he's there to help treat, how is he going to treat it? I keep thinking of that scene in My Big Fat Greek Wedding, you know, the diner owner who sprays Windex on everything. You know, you got a boo-boo and he sprays Windex on it. Well, what are they going to do if he doesn't know what he's treating? So, and a third, there's this unidentified odor expert that Ashland is going to bring in. This seems like a kind of a group of failures being brought in to take another shot at the problem. We think that the proper approach must be an evaluation that is expert, independent, and neutral. It must follow their processing cycle over many days and nights to observe how odors are handled. The expert must have complete access to the plant, and care must be taken that the expert not be co-opted by the plant. We have to think that political contributions are about, especially when they don't arrive until there are problems like the odors, that they're about getting access and influence. And the plant is not above that. And to that I would add something I haven't told a lot of people about, but I thought it was very strange a few years ago when I, by default, emerged as someone to coordinate the odor complaints. The plant manager offered me the use of the Baker Commodities summer resort cottage in the hills of Pennsylvania. He said, take the whole family down, have a good time. Just let me know. And I have that in an email. It's not word of mouth. It was very nice, but to me it seems like he's not just trying to be nice, he's trying to co-opt someone who's critical. So care must be taken that whoever this outside expert is, that the contract specifies that he's not doing work for Baker within 3, 4, or 5 years, because they will try to offer him work at one of their other plants. We believe the town has the power to compel such an evaluation, which BC has strenuously refused. But when we asked the supervisor to ask the state attorney general for its opinion on the power of the town to do that, Tony gave me a written refusal from the board and said, "We don't want to go down that road, Bob. The road of information gathering." Number 3, testing of plant emissions. What are they putting out through the stacks, and what are we breathing? How much of those 110 possible chemicals is reaching our neighborhood? Release, number 4, release the confidential agreement between the town and the plant. Now, I remember last fall, Mr. Horwitz said that when the case against Baker Commodities was terminated, never went to court, that it ended with transparency. I'm remembering perhaps complete transparency, but the word transparency. I don't understand how you can have transparency if there's a confidential agreement between the town and a company that it regulates.
So I'm going to stop you there for a minute, Bob, because that's the third time that we've talked about this confidential or super secret agreement.
Maybe more.
And maybe more, but at least 3 times. And I think Mr. Horwitz commented on that in the past, but I'm going to ask him to comment on that again.
Absolutely.
Because, now
You were on the scene, Mr. Horwitz, right?
Mr. Reed, I have informed you on several occasions. There is no secret agreement. There has never been a secret agreement. You keep mentioning a secret agreement, alleging a secret agreement. I categorically say that is false.
Okay. Well, secret
Totally
or
false.
confidential?
Totally false.
Okay.
No confidential
No
agreement.
confidential agreement.
No secret agreement.
Well, then, what was Mr. Dorr talking about in his letter to you in 1989 when he mentions the confidential agreement with the plant?
There
What was he
is
talking about?
no confidential agreement. There never has been a confidential agreement.
Yeah. Well, what was he talking about then?
Ask Mr. Dorr.
Okay, I think that would be great for Tony to do.
I think it would be great.
I don't think he's going to
I am
answer my
telling you,
request.
as the town attorney, and I've
Yeah.
told you this for years, there has never been and there is no secret agreement.
Okay, you haven't been telling me that for years.
4 years.
Last year at the meeting was the first time I brought it up in this setting. But you did,
I won't debate how many
okay,
times
sure,
or how many years.
okay.
I just want to make
Yeah.
it clear to the public, there is no secret agreement between the town and Baker Commodities, and the implication that the town is complicit in causing odors, I find to be a falsehood.
well, you're entitled to that conclusion, I suppose. But we have Mr. Dorr's letter to you mentioning such an agreement and the return of information that the town had gathered during the case.
I think that is your interpretation of a letter that is public, so if you want to get the letter out
Yeah.
and have a discussion with me about it,
Sure.
I'd be delighted.
Sure, well, okay. I don't fully understand why he would talk about a confidential agreement if there wasn't one.
I don't even
Yeah.
want to argue with you.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Dorr apparently disagrees with you.
I don't think so.
Okay. That agreement should be released.
There is no agreement.
Okay. Number 5, establish through evaluation of Baker records that they are indeed conforming to the size and scope limitations of their non-conforming use permit. If needed, assist them in applying for a variance with proper controls, extensive monitoring, and serious ramifications for odors. Enact a steeply progressive system of fines for egregious odors. Number 7, any and all other steps needed to rapidly and effectively return Baker to the benchmark for odor control. 0 complaints for 8 years. Tony's on-air comment, I forget whether it was Channel 8 or Channel 13 recently, that the goal was to minimize the number of days with odors, is a loophole big enough to drive a semi through. It's inadequate. We want to go back to what we had for 8 years. I fear that our plan may be dead on arrival. I've been pretty frank, and your reaction might be to shoot the messenger and the message. Earlier presentations I've made, I was polite and meek asking for your help, and no help was extended. Tonight I spoke, as others may as well, as someone holding what Louis Brandeis called the only political office higher than that of president, the office of citizen. We deserve respect and action. I think you would too. So we hope that inside each of you is a fellow resident and neighbor who went into public service to help people and who must be and should be outraged at what's been happening. All of us here hope that, and that you have enough courage and independence to speak and act on behalf of the neighbors of Western Penfield. Half measures and symbolic but empty meetings and studies to kick the can down the road are not called for. All these petition elements need to be pursued at once, and perhaps more. There needs to be a regulatory structure to respond forcefully to odor complaints so that the neighborhood does not have to organize and fight for fairness every time the odors recur. Emailing the plant manager and asking what's wrong is not a response. And structuring a forceful response and verification should be your job. We don't want temporary improvement and then a slide back to poor performance later. You're surrounded by opportunities as our board members. Grab them and pursue them with energy and endurance. And in the next election cycle, you can put on your campaign literature that you've helped the neighborhoods of Western Penfield improve their quality of life. It's certainly as important as two of the items you had under that list when you campaigned in the fall, the turn signal and a traffic light at various intersections. Not that they're not important, but clean air should be at the top of the list. And then you can brag about how government solves problems for citizens. I have the petition, and if you have any further questions or comments, I'd be glad to take them.
I think if you just turn that into the clerk, Bob, we'll certainly make sure that each board member gets a complete copy of your written statements and petition. And as we do with all petitions, we will respond back as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Steve Healy.
Ready?
Always.
I can tell. So I'm Steve Healy. I live at 231 Parkview Drive with my wife and son. I've got a postulate about what's at the root of the problem here, and it might help us cut to the chase and solve the problem sooner, which is my interest. And I think it's really all our interests. And, above all, we'd like to see the employees at Baker keep their jobs. We'd like to see the town, the county, and the state keep their tax base. And we'd like to be odor-free, our environment to be odor-free. That's really what we're shooting for here. So just keep that in mind as I go through this, all right? My postulate is based on my experience, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that so you can understand my perspective. I've been on Bill's shoes as plant manager. So I was in the biotech space. I served as a plant manager for a while. And the plant that I served at, we had some pretty horrific odor complaints. So I've dealt with irate neighbors, and I know what it's like to receive those complaints. And it's hard to believe sometimes that the complaints can come from the far away as they do. We had complaints from 3 miles away. It was hard to believe that the odors from our plant could travel that far and be that noxious to those people. But when they described the odors to us, it was very clear it came from our biotech fermentation process because they were unmistakable. It's just like the rendering odors. They're unmistakable too. It's not from the swamp. It's not from the stables. It's not from the landfill. It's from the smell of rotting meat. It's unmistakable. It can't be diverted elsewhere. So, when we had this problem with the plant, my team and I solved the problem. We figured out what it was. It was a failing scrubber. We fixed the scrubber, and we put an SOP program into effect so that problem never came up again on my watch when I was plant manager. And we made it right with the neighbors by giving everybody gift certificates to dinner. Made them happy, and the problem was solved, and it was done. But it took us about a month from beginning to end to completely solve that and make it right with the neighbors. So the point I'm making here is that odor control problems and solutions shouldn't be a 9-year ordeal, from 2005 to 2014. I've solved them. I've solved them in short order. For something to go on that long, something else is at play here, and that's what we're trying to figure out, right? Second, I served as Director of Product Development and Commercialization for a bioremediation company in Victor. And as part of that role, I was actually in the Baker plant for a period of time, well, for about 2 hours. And, we had a green system where natural microbes would consume these odor-causing chemicals, right? It's a nice green system, it works, but it's not as reliable as a thermal oxidizer, right? And so Baker did not buy one of these units from us because they already had a thermal oxidizer or two. And that is actually to Baker's great credit, because those are expensive to operate. But the point here is that thermal oxidizers are the gold standard of odor control. You can't do better than that. And the reason is that you're burning, you're combusting all these odor components, right? When you try to use scrubbers, you're using an equilibrium process where the odor components are getting absorbed into water, right? That's never going to be as efficient as burning them, but it's going to be a lot less costly. So with TO, when you're running TOs, you're spending a lot of money on natural gas. So they're the gold standard, but they're expensive. But to Baker's credit, they had put those in. And then from 1997 to 2005, nobody knew Baker was there. They had a good, long run with, as far as I know, essentially 0 odor complaints, right? That's pretty good. And third, when I served for this bioremediation company, I worked in this giant Rothsay rendering plant in Canada. This plant was enormous. They had piles of pig carcasses, probably 3/4 the size of this room and maybe 1.5 times as high. They moved these pig carcasses with this giant front loader in an enormous warehouse. It was an enormous operation. But the point here is that rendering is based on economies of scale, right? That was a huge plant. Baker is tiny. This Baker plant is tiny. Quite honestly, I've been surprised that they could operate at that scale profitably as long as they have. And as having been a plant manager, I know the pressures you're under to cut costs by any means you can to stay alive and make a profit. And I got no problem with profit. So here's my postulate. So for 8 years, after the TOs were installed, there was no odor. They've succeeded before. It worked, right? It worked. The problem was solved. So then, like I said before, TOs use the natural gas, so it's a cost factor. So something changed in 2005. And I'm suspecting that what may have changed is economic conditions for the rendering industry, right? So margins may have become razor thin. And I believe, whoever is running the plant, Bill, has to be pretty damn competent to have kept a tiny little plant like that going this long. But what I believe is happening, potentially, as a postulate, is that margins are razor thin, and they've probably had to cut back on how much the TOs are run, or try to convert over to a scrubber process from TOs. And the scrubbers are never going to be as efficient as a TO, right? But they're going to be a lot less costly. So I'm suspecting what has happened here is that the Baker plant is struggling to survive. And, like I said in the beginning, we want them to, but we want to be able to breathe clean air. That's all. So, we're asking for an independent third party to be brought in here. because the town and the DC and Baker have all worked on this for 9 years and the problem hasn't been solved, right? We've got to get to the bottom of this and move on. So what I'm suggesting is that, a third party come in, a truly independent third party come in and focus on the TOs right from the get-go and compare how were those TOs run from 1997 to 2005 and how have they been run since. And let's see if we can get a baseline there. I might be wrong about this, and I'd like to be proven wrong if that's the case. But let's get this third-party independent entity in there and evaluate this and see if this is part of the root of the problem. And then if it is, then we can address it and see where we go from there. So what I'm asking here right now is that, our neighborhood team, there's about maybe 8 of us or so that have been core to pushing this thing forward under Bob's leadership. So we would like to be involved with you, Tony, and the town and the DEC in choosing an independent third party and be part of that process. We'd also like to see validated findings shared with openness and transparency with us, whether it's from the DEC or a third party. We'd like to see some measurement of the emissions and what is actually going on there in a transparent manner. And really, I think going forward here right now, what we'd be asking you for, Tony, is can you get together a meeting with our core team and you and the DEC within the next week or two so we can sit down, talk about the petition and what the next steps are.
What we can certainly do, I have not had any further interface or discussion with DEC as to their most recent activity down there, Steve, but I'll certainly, I want to hear back, and Tom Marriott has indicated that he will provide some information back on that, and then certainly I think what the board will want to do is identify what our next steps are.
Yeah.
So
when Tom
certainly
comes
that's part
back
of
to you
that-
with the information.
Part of that piece that we'll take a look at, absolutely.
Sounds good. But the information that Tom comes back with, can that be shared in a transparent manner, or is that confidential for?
I would think that anything that the New York State DEC puts out, in fact, is all open to the public.
Yeah. So Baker's got to safeguard their process to some degree, right? Their proprietary part of their process. But odor control systems are pretty well known. So that might get to be public through some of this DEC investigation, but I would think that would not compromise Baker because it's not necessarily a proprietary part of their process.
I would think that has some merit, Steve.
Yeah.
I mean, there are businesses all around that have proprietary type of operations, equipment, and things like that.
Yeah.
But to review something like that, the DEC doesn't necessarily have to disclose a proprietary in nature. I'm sure from a competition standpoint and what have you, those things are protected. But certainly DEC and others taking a look at that. Folks sign confidentiality agreements on some regular basis. I'm sure. You've had in your career as you go into plants, because they don't want you leaving that plant to go into another plant and say, oh, by the way,
exactly.
These are what these folks are doing. This technology that might be proprietary in nature. So and covered with some type of patent. So
So we look forward to hearing from you and getting together?
Absolutely.
Sounds good.
It's
Thank you.
also, in my experience, it's not uncommon for agencies, particularly regulatory agencies, if they're going to issue a report, they can redact information.
Yeah.
Sometimes you may have seen in your experience a report that has big black, they're keeping the Sharpie business in business.
I know.
And it may appear to be secret, confidential, whatever you want to use. In fact, it's appropriate redaction based upon trade secrets usually.
Yeah.
Or business practice.
Yep. So, Board, is there anything else I can answer in terms of questions that you might have for me?
No, Steve, just real quickly, I just want to add that I believe the permit that Baker Commodities has through the state DEC also has a requirement on public access to records.
Okay, good.
So I believe that's right in the permit with the state DEC.
Good.
So
well, I'd love to see them.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Steve, thank you very much. I was going to say, if you have a copy that you're able or willing to share, we'll make sure everybody gets a copy of that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Vern
Good luck with
Loveless.
good luck with those shifts at McDonald's.
Excuse me. Hello. Good evening. I'm Vern Loveless. I live at 1900 Westfall Drive since 1987. And when I moved into the neighborhood and built a home, I was not aware of the problem with Stappenbeck, i.e. Baker, or any odor problem in the community when we built. I fully support the petition submitted today to the Town Board of Penfield. I have participated in stockholders meetings held here at the town buildings. The participants, Mr. Schmieder from Baker Commodities, Mr. LaFountain, the town supervisor, Mr. Costello from the town, Mr. Osterhout from Baker Commodities, and Mr. Marriott from the DEC, and a group of residents from the Parkview, Old Westfall, Woodhaven neighborhood came together on a monthly basis to discuss the ongoing malodor problem emanating from Baker Commodities. I do apologize for some redundancy in what I'm going to say and what others have already said before me. I felt our purpose was to bring to the various representatives a history of complaints and to work toward a resolution of the problem and no malodor permeating our neighborhood. At these meetings, we urged our representatives, Mr. LaFountain and Mr. Costello, to canvass the adjacent Penfield residents and to canvass the nearby Brighton and City neighborhoods to see how far-ranging Baker Commodities was affecting the air that we all breathe. How big is the problem? As you may know, our neighborhood is a very small pie-shaped wedge around Baker Commodities. It's circled by a huge amount of land from Brighton in the city. Our request was not done. We asked for studies to assay the air exhaust emissions from this plant to try and understand chemicals and byproducts which were being pumped into our local atmosphere. This would have been very easy to use different forms of chromatography to take samples and run it through a local laboratory. At a meeting in this very room last year, a representative with the Baker Commodities from Ashland said that he did not even know what was contained in the emissions from this plant, and he was here representing them. Baker Commodities sits down in a valley along Arundecoit Creek. The emissions from the plant and our ability to perceive them are affected by the prevailing winds and the land contour. Our recommendation was not acted on. To my knowledge, soil and water samples have not been evaluated. In the past, Stappenbeck Industries, which preceded Baker at this plant, was cited for violations of contaminating the adjacent waterway. We asked for independent review by a third party of the daily plant functions to see if they were compliant with regulations and that the plant was functioning at the highest level to avoid malodor and air contamination. The yearly walkthrough provided by the DEC never came about when we were suffering from the malodors, nor when the plant was pouring out the malodorous material. Mr. LaFountain has been on tour through the plant, but I doubt he has the proper credentials to offer a critical opinion, and that's no offense to you, Tony. I understand
None taken.
your education. Our resident group does have such an individual, we feel, and that's Mr. Steve Healy. To this date, and to my knowledge, he has not been invited to walk through the facility while it was functioning and act as our representative. Actually, at one of our stakeholder meetings, Mr. Schmieder indicated that Mr. Healy did not have sufficient background and credentials to offer such an opinion. Mr. Healy would soundly argue that point, as you've heard today when he discussed a little bit of his curriculum vitae. We asked for time and date stamped thermal records to show that the thermal oxidizers were indeed functioning at optimal temperatures when they were in process. This was done. We were hoping that a correlation might emerge when comparing the record with the occurrence of malodor in our neighborhood. Not all residents would complain, so our number of individuals willing to report was suboptimal, and because the odors were most appreciated when we were outside, our time to sample the air was also limited. Mr. Schmieder claims he saw no correlation, but didn't offer certified correlation. But there was no reliable outside verification of any of the notes that Mr. Schmieder indicated. Recent email communication between Mr. Schmieder and one of our neighbors has suggested that various air scrubbers are used at different parts of the process to eliminate odors, and certain odors that he could perceive would be related to certain scrubbers. It sounds like if they can characterize the odor in our neighborhood, they can trace it back to a specific scrubber. They have been unwilling to use technology to assay the expelled gas, only the sensitive noses of their staff. At our meetings, I was led to believe that the thermal oxidizers were the end-all be-all for the malodors that were potentially emanating from their stacks. Occasionally, when complaints were made back to the Baker Commodities Company in a timely manner, Mr. Schmieder has driven into the neighborhoods to see if he can note a malodor. He has encountered residents that were appreciating that malodor, but he could not. The implication from him was that there was no malodor unless he could smell it. I have repeatedly questioned his ability in our stakeholder meetings, and have suggested that he has, with chronic exposure, become desensitized to the odors. He flatly denied this repeatedly. While there is wide circumstantial evidence from dairy farmers, pig farmers, and chicken farmers who will tell you that they have become accustomed to the malodors that their farms produce. Those of us that have worked in hospitals for years do not notice the subtle odors that you visitors quickly smell and associate with a hospital and health care. We use an extensive list of disinfectants and chemicals in hospitals and offices. We become desensitized to them. I doubt Mr. Schmieder has failed to become desensitized, and I resent his using his ability to smell as the metric by which malodors are judged in this community. Monthly stakeholder meetings resulted in limited progress. I feel that we have been stonewalled by participants of the meeting. This may be due to unwillingness to pay for the requested studies and possible improvements. Big industry is noted for putting profits first and above the well-being of the general population that reside nearby, or consume their products, or, as we all know, drive their vehicles. They have people who assess the expense of fixing a problem versus watching the problem grow and possibly litigating it. Baker Commodities has succeeded in kicking the can down the road for the past 9 years and making more profits at our peril. But remember that when the town sued Baker over these very same problems in the latter part of the 80s, Baker backed down and subsequently fixed the problem if the lawsuit was dropped. We should be able to open those records of evidence for review, if they still exist. As I understand, the town of Brighton at one time was brought into the fray. We know Baker Commodities is able to attain and maintain an odor-free environment for us neighbors, for they did this for an extended period until 2005. What changed? Did their equipment become less efficient? Do they, at their discretion, try to fine-tune their odor control on a fine knife edge to optimize profits? Do they try to process more raw material than they have capacity for? Do they now receive material that their equipment was not designed for processing, and are they trying to push it through the existing process without updating with proper equipment? I do not know, and those that do aren't talking. As a participant in this process, I had thought our meetings would be shared with the town board by Mr. LaFountain and Mr. Costello. To this date, I have no evidence this has occurred. I had specifically requested that the board be informed about certain issues, and I have no knowledge if they were. It may be with a great deal of naivete that I have participated in this process for the past 2 years. Essentially, I believe that people are trying to do their best for us and will make their best effort. I now frequently have questioned this. The past 9 years have shown that a leader in biologic waste processing, Baker Commodities, still can't or won't do its best for our community. May I ask the board a few questions? Can you answer them without hedging? Is the board of Penfield of today willing to follow the town board of the mid-1980s in pursuing Baker Commodities in court if they do not rectify our grievances regarding the malodors?
Certainly, Doctor, I would say that if it ever got to that point, yes, we would look to do that. I would hope that it would never get to that point. That means that it has been a total failure of things if it gets back to the way it was back in the 80s.
We're in 2014. We've worked 9 years together, and we're still no more than an inch from shore. It's almost a total failure so far. I hope that your efforts with the DEC and Baker and Allied are works. Mm-hmm. But I think we have to be prepared to go forward and reignite the litigation process. Is there any legal or otherwise agreement between the town of Penfield and Baker Commodities stemming from the legal action of the mid-'80s? I know Mr. Horowitz has addressed this with Bob Reed. I've seen the letter. I've read it. There's no misinterpretation. There is reference to a confidential agreement. No matter how many times you say no, the rest of us will say in concert, yes, there is a reference to a confidential agreement. I've read it. Have we been wasting our time over the past years in trying to get your participation in our plight against Baker? Why has the process taken 9 years? I cannot, for the life of me, figure out why a group of adults sitting together can't work towards a common end and eliminate this. I mean, they did it once before. Tony, you in a meeting once said, what is acceptable? And my response to you was, they did it for 8 years. Mm-hmm. No odors is the metric by which I judge their ability to work in our environment. They've set the bar. We're not asking for anything that they haven't already given us for a prolonged period of time. I mean, we're not a group of fools. They've done it. They should be able to do it again. I just learned tonight that Tom Marriott is from the state DEC. Can we contact the federal department or the DEC for any assistance from them through our town? Because if the state doesn't have the manpower and are unwilling to move forward on this, this may be a federal issue also. And
Mr. Lovelace, can I ask you a question?
Oh, yeah,
Right
Doctor.
here? Doctor, when you talk about the state DEC, have you had any communication or conversations with State Senator Ted O'Brien?
Personally?
Yes.
I have
Or
not.
just, I'm just asking,
I have
or
not
Assemblyman
personally-
Mark Johns?
I have not personally talked
Okay.
to any state representatives.
Okay.
Legal counsel advised that we talk with them. Now, whether Mr. Reed has done that or not, I have no idea.
Okay.
Would you advocate?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I would. I would think that as state legislators who have very influential abilities with a state agency, that I would highly encourage you or anybody to be in communication with them, especially if you're dissatisfied with how they're handling their permit with Baker Commodities. It's not the town's permit, it's the State Department of Environmental Conservation's permit with them. So I'm just saying that's another avenue to go, by all means.
By your
So-
statement, I would infer that this whole process supersedes town responsibility and ability to act. Am I correct?
I would tend to agree with you.
that we're barking at the wrong tree.
I wouldn't necessarily say you're barking at the wrong tree, but I think that the efforts need to be redirected somewhat to the state representatives.
And
They would oversee any legislative enactment of DEC regulations, but also, as Councilman Moore mentioned, reaching out to either Senator O'Brien or Assemblyman Mark Johns, they will be able to interact with those state representatives within the agencies directly, more frequently, on behalf of the residents. And I would say that Senator O'Brien's office is within walking distance of your house.
Would you state that the Town Board of Penfield would stand next to us as we went forward in this process?
I would be willing personally, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the board, but I would be willing to help interact with the state representatives to try to facilitate a meeting and/or help open that door for you. I would also suggest that the emails that we receive on a regular basis are forwarded to both Senator O'Brien's office and Mark John's office for them to see the frequency that we receive the emails.
Then I have a real curveball question.
All right.
9 years. Why weren't we told this 9 years ago?
That I don't know. And I regret not mentioning it sooner, at least myself personally. But as we continue to do more research or look from this angle, I mean, from this side of the table, I mean, the permit is a DEC permit. And obviously there's the EPA, and I would assume that the EPA has regulations of their own, and I'm not familiar with those really any more than I am familiar with DEC permit. But I would definitely suggest, I mean, DEC is the regulatory authority. They are the permitting agency. And I remember a comment made a while back, but if something is lacking within any form of oversight, you know, that can definitely, I think, be handled much easier at the state level than the town level.
Well, thank you.
Well, there's also, I would concur, and I think one thing that keeps striking with me with respect to state versus town, whether there is the authority or the permissiveness to regulate, if New York State Department of Environmental Conservation can't handle something, what makes us think the town of Penfield can? And I say that because of our experience, recent experience with the State Department of Environmental Conservation. The money alone, your tax dollars alone that go back to DEC for unfunded mandates to the town of Penfield could probably pay to help a lot of this problem. So I look at it as somewhat circular. Your tax dollars are already going to support the State Department of Environmental Conservation. Why aren't they being put to use? That's the way I look at it, because I will say, quite honestly, I have had, since this has gotten to the media, we have residents who say, town, don't do a darn thing about Baker's commodity. Don't do a darn thing. And you'll see on social media extensive comments saying, I'm not saying this is my opinion, but from Penfield residents saying, I grew up in Penfield. It was Stappenbeck's. You know, why should the town be doing anything? That's not my opinion, but I think somebody should be doing something, and I do keep falling back on the DEC. No love lost with me in the DEC, especially in my involvement on the Watershed Management Committee and unfunded mandates that this town has had to spend to satisfy the DEC with ponds, with drainage, with the Willow Pond Dam. So I certainly have no problem with pushing back on the DEC and saying, you're the permitting agency here. You've got a body here. What are you going to do about it? And I would fully support, and I would join you in that.
Thank you. Relative to Bob Reed's question to Tony about the Attorney General of the state of New York, what would it take to move with their office? We're talking about our state representatives. What would it take to move with the Attorney General?
The DEC, they work hand in hand with the AG's office when it comes to enforcement. They're the ones that tap the shoulder of the AG's office for enforcement.
Very good.
And again, interacting with the state representatives.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. Our next person signed
No one
up?
else has signed
Okay. So we'll come to the point that if you didn't sign up, that's okay. We'll spend as much time as we need here. to hear any and all comments. So if you didn't sign up on any matter, it can be certainly the Baker commodity, or it can be any matter. If anyone would like to address the board, we'll take them as hands rise. Yes, and then Jeff, you'll be number 2, and we'll go on from there. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Lydia Palmer. I am at 17 Old Westfall Drive, right next to Vern and Sue Lovelace. A couple of points. I do want to state just right out there that I do support the petition from Bob. I would say that I have lived at Old Westfall Drive for 10 years. For the first 3 or 4 years, I'd never even heard of Baker Commodities. I didn't know the plant existed. In the last 2 to 3 years, the scope and the increased frequency of and I don't like to use the term odor, because odor is something that you get when you open your refrigerator and the milk has gone bad. I refer to it and mention to the plant rep that in our house, Baker stench is a proper noun, because it is so bad and because it is so consistent in the nature of the smell that there's no way that you can refer to it as nuisance odors, which I believe is the term that Baker likes to use. Makes it sound like, a gnat flying about. It's not. It's horrible. Tony, you mentioned in the press that you have smelled this. It is not pleasant. Linda, you grew up with it. It is not a nuisance. It is a wretched stench. For the last 2 to 3 years, it has become, obviously, to Bob's data, much more frequent. I would also submit that it has become much more widespread. When I moved in, the smell didn't come down Old Westfall Drive. That's why I didn't know the plant existed. Now, on a regular basis, it blankets the entire neighborhood. I get up in the morning to run. You can start at the end of Old Westfall Drive and smell it. You can smell it all the way through the neighborhood, down Parkview, down the little ravine, and up toward Parkington Meadow. You can smell it through the entire neighborhood. It is getting increasingly worse. The amount of time and effort from the people in the neighborhood put in to document these problems, to come to the board meetings, is substantial. All of us have other things we would rather be doing. The plant manager, as some people have mentioned, and I've been the recipient of some of his emails, is I understand he's doing a job. I understand he's trying to work in a professional manner. But as Vern said, he dismisses the odors. He claims that they simply don't exist, which I find rather bizarre, because there's no possible way anyone standing in that neighborhood could say the odor doesn't exist. There are times that it exists. Our first speaker, I thought, appreciated his comments. If you are not outside before 9 o'clock in the morning, or not outside after 8 o'clock in the evening, you have a much lower probability of smelling it. But for people who are active, who are outside, who have children outside, it's very apparent. And it's certainly apparent, the June 27th episode, where you could literally smell it coming in through your windows at night, at 10 o'clock at night. The worst part of all of it, I would say, to Bob's treatise there on imagine yourselves in our position, I do have to agree. I would love nothing more than to be able to say to the town board, I have total confidence in your ability and the DEC and Baker's ability working together to resolve the problem. But after the length of time, after watching my neighbors approach this process openly, professionally, in the way that citizens are supposed to approach the political process, the community process, not even the political process, the community process, and having it go on and on and on for this length of time with no significant effort to resolve, I think has led many of us to feel that we don't trust the board and Baker and the DEC to address the issue. We don't feel that without transparency, without true measures and accountability for Baker, that anything will ever be resolved. It will be a Band-Aid, short term, to make everybody feel good, like things have been resolved, and then it will simply go back to the way it was. There is no incentive for Baker to be a good citizen unless the town board holds them accountable. The last comments here about sending this up to the DEC, I can speak to the question of Senator O'Brien. He has been contacted, and we have made efforts to try to get in touch with him to address this. But at the very beginning of Bob's comment, and I'm not a state lawyer and not familiar with the regulations, but he stated pretty clearly that the state grants the town boards authority, considerable authority to regulate rendering plants. So I don't believe the answer to this problem is to simply expect the DEC to take everything on. I think they should be a partner, and I think Tony is working to make that happen. But I believe this is a community issue. And I believe it is an issue that this town board needs to take the lead in ensuring gets resolved, not simply passing it up to the DEC to address. The last thing I would say...
It is a partnership.
Yes.
It is a partnership.
Yes, but you, as our representatives, are the people at the front line. And that's what we're asking for, is for you to take that leadership role and say, enough is enough. We need to fix this. The last thing I suggest, people have mentioned the cost issues of these kind of studies. Rochester is blessed with a wealth of higher education institutions, many of whom have substantial expertise in environmental conservation, engineering, systems planning and engineering. And I would suggest, if cost is an issue, I don't expect anybody to actually admit that, but if cost is an issue, that we approach U of R and RIT and ask them for their help in addressing these problems, in trying to find a solution to something that for 9 years Baker has either not been able to solve or has not desired to solve. Thank you.
Thanks, Lydia. Thank you. Yes, Jeff, next one. And after Jeff, Fred, and then over here.
My name's Jeff Burns. I live at 39 Scarborough Park in Penfield. Tim Murphy and I ran for town board last year, and we walked a lot of the neighborhoods around town. And one of the neighborhoods was the Parkview neighborhood, and we heard about the frustrations that the neighbors there were having, both with the DEC, with Baker Commodities, and with the town board, and they felt like they were not being heard and that action wasn't being taken. At that time, Tim and I promised that we would follow up on this, whether we were elected or not, and that's how I happen to be here now. And I have stayed in touch with the neighbors, and I've been interested in what's been going on there. First thing I wanted to raise was that one of the earlier speakers mentioned something about Baker Commodities or its predecessor having been here for nearly 100 years or so. And he suggested that it may be grandfathered in some way. So I'd like to ask a question. Is Baker Commodities grandfathered in any manner, or does it have to obey the current town, county, state, and federal laws?
They certainly are pre-existing non-conforming use. So based on when they went in and how long they've been there, they're a pre-existing non-conforming use. However, that doesn't mean that that they can just run and do whatever they want whenever they want. They're held to standards and regulations, from the New York State DEC, and that is that permitting agency. But yes, they are pre-existing non-conforming. Like a gun club, we've got a couple gun clubs in the town. Been here for 40, 50, 60 years. A lot of residents would like to see them shut down, go away. But they are in fact a pre-existing non-conforming use, and as long as they operate, as they had operated, then they're permitted to, continue to operate.
But in regards to environmental laws, clean air, clean water, they have to obey the laws, just like any other.
DEC is the permitting agency,
Yeah.
yes.
So in regards to that, they're not grandfathered in terms of air pollution or water pollution.
Right.
Correct, okay. The next thing I wanted to mention was that I looked up the DEC permit, and I noticed that it's a conditional permit, that there are a number of conditions that Baker Commodities must follow. And condition number 29 is air pollution prohibited. And what it says is, and I'm going to paraphrase, or not paraphrase, but I'm going to eliminate some so that I don't bore you with the whole thing. Condition 29 of the Baker permit relates to 6 NYCRR 211.2, which I think means something to Richard. I don't know. That's
The state regulation.
okay.
New York
Good.
Codes, Rules, and Regulations.
There we go.
NYCR.
Okay, thanks. And again, this is a truncated version, but these are the exact words. No person shall cause or allow emissions of air contaminants to the outdoor atmosphere of such characteristics or duration which unreasonably interfere with the comfortable enjoyment or life of or property. This prohibition applies but is not limited to any odor or deleterious emission. So I would present to you that this effect that people are finding from Baker now certainly does affect their enjoyment of life and property. And I know some people have tried to suggest that maybe this is just an odor that can be ignored. I've heard it described as an odor that can make a maggot gag. So it's really pretty sufficient to follow that you should really be as careful as possible to get rid of this odor that's offending the neighbors in that area. The next thing I wanted to mention from the permit was that there is a list of permitted emissions in the permit, and somebody else had asked about this and what is being allowed to be emitted. And I'd like to read that list. It's item 4.1. It's part of the conditions of the contaminant list. And these are the allowed emissions: formaldehyde, benzene, ethane, pardon me because I'm not a scientist, naphthalene, ethylbenzene, toluene, carbon monoxide, xylene, lead, manganese, mercury, nickel, metal, and insoluble compounds, antimony, arsenic, beryllium, cadmium, chromium, cobalt, sulfur dioxide, hydrogen chloride, phosphorus, selenium, particulates, PM10, HAP, oxides of nitrogen, VOC, which I believe are volatile organic compounds, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. Now, I'll leave others to determine exactly what all that means and which of those may be carcinogens and which aren't. But there is a long list of chemicals, and these are the chemicals that are allowed to be emitted. This doesn't mean that it's a hazard. It may be completely controlled. We don't know, but it's worth noting that these are the chemicals that are allowed to be emitted.
And Jeff, you are corroborating exactly what Councilman Moore brought up, and what we've been concurring as well. You make a good point in referencing the DEC permit, which is online. You can access it by a simple Google search. So you are definitely corroborating Councilman Moore's position.
Well, you bring up Councilman Moore, and the one thing I was stunned is something he said was, though, that the board seems to be saying tonight that you guys can't really help, and that they should go to the state. And I'm stunned to hear that. It seems to be passing the buck that this would happen after 9 years.
I don't think we said that, Jeff.
No.
Let's make sure the record's clear. Certainly, New York State DEC is a permitting agency, but at no time did the town say that we don't have any interest and we're not involved. I mean, if that were the case, then we wouldn't be having ongoing discussions with Baker and ongoing conversations with the DEC. So, I mean, the town isn't saying that.
But
that's
if there was
the
a
case.
thought that the state could help, I would have expected that if there was a roadblock, that some help would be provided sooner than now. I mean, I think the residents have the right to clean air, and they shouldn't have to wait another 9 years to have clean air.
Jeff, can I just jump in for a second?
Sure.
My comments as far as bringing up the state legislators was strictly in a sense of another avenue to pursue some help and some assistance here. I mean, the state legislature basically oversees the Department of Environmental Conservation for the state of New York. They certainly fund the department. So I think a speaker raised questions about, proper staffing. The state legislators, Mr. O'Brien and Mr. Johns would be the appropriate people to go to address those issues. And I'm glad you have the permit there. I think you and I are looking at the same document right now. And, when I look at that document, and I'm sure you've looked at it too, you see a bunch of different paragraphs about environmental conservation law. You see conditions about DEC inspections. You see conditions about the ability for the DEC to revoke the permit. And, the permit with Baker Commodities, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, conditions about acceptable air quality, conditions about public access to record keeping. A gentleman was talking about that, and I concur with his ability to get the appropriate documents once they're released.
But has the town board ever helped provide any help in getting these documents? I mean, it seems, a lot of us are lay people. We don't know where all the information is available. But in that case, I looked at that too, that there's public access to the record keeping. A lot of the things, though, that are in the public, that are in the record keeping, though, are things that are on request by the DEC. It's not something that looks like several of these areas where within the permit it says that the reporting is when the DEC requests it. How do they determine when they're going to?
No, and that's a very good point. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's where I think the state legislators can really help. They can enforce that the DEC provides the documents that they're required to provide, whether it's to the town board or to residents. They're the ones that would have the ability to enforce that and to make sure it does happen. One of the speakers, or I forget who it was, and I apologize, talked about their dissatisfaction with the state DEC and their mistrust of the state DEC. And again, I concur, with what you said and what I said earlier, as far as that's what the state legislators can help with. If there's some distrust there, go to the state legislators and see how they can help with getting the DEC to be more of an enforcement mechanism in this particular situation. So all I was doing was just throwing out as another avenue to pursue to help us get to a resolution for this problem.
No, I don't mean to be.
I think the other thing,
sorry.
I think the other important thing, Jeff, is that Tom Marriott has been around for near 40 years and very, very well respected and involved with Baker for a number of years. And I'm not as quick necessarily to throw Mr. Marriott under the bus for either not being involved or not doing his due diligence or anything like that, because I think he has been involved right when we had the lawsuit. He was an integral piece of that. I know that he's at the plant on a regular basis. I know that he's in the neighborhood on a regular basis, in the morning before he goes in. And he's not done that just in the last week or 2 weeks. I mean, he's done that, for the last several years, because, he lives in the general area or close to the general area. And that's one of his areas that he has responsibility for. So, I think that he has, from my perspective, any time that I've asked him for information or I've asked him to follow up on different things, he's done that. And I know that when Bob Reed asked for, some copies of materials when we had some of our meetings, that Tom brought those and presented those. So, I mean, he has been, from my perspective, has been, in fact, responsive. So I'm not going to argue the point, is he overworked and is the department understaffed, but my dealings with him over the years has been that he has been responsible and followed up and followed through.
And Jeff, if I may add,
Sure.
by way of clarification, so many years ago when the town joined with DEC and joined with the Attorney General's office, and we hired a very substantial litigation firm to address a very widespread situation that we felt was a public nuisance. And at the end of the lawsuit, the permit, as you discussed, and all these improvements and substantial investments of hundreds of thousands of dollars were made by Baker Commodities. And I'm hearing that for many years, for 9 years, it was perfect, after the lawsuit. What has happened since is a matter of everybody trying to get to the bottom and the root problem and trying to correct it.
Mm-hmm.
I think as a result of resolving the lawsuit, the State Environmental Conservation Department had the expertise in-house on staff that the town of Penfield did not have. And it was a state agency that had jurisdiction over the plant, over the regulations, and is the enforcement agency which worked in concert with the town and in concert as appropriate with the Attorney General's office and brought litigation where it was necessary. We are at this point now in 2014 trying to address this effectively. And I think what Mr. Moore said in involving the state and all of us working together and not trying to disparage one entity over another. I think that's counterproductive. I want to say something about this secret agreement business again. As we all discussed before, there was proprietary information in the course of the lawsuit that the court protected that was a business proprietary information, but it was no secret agreement between the town of Penfield. And I think there's been a misconstruction of a letter that Mr. Dorr sent, and I would be glad to meet with Mr. Reed and the good doctor about that, because I think when we would read that together, I think we would come out with the real meaning behind that.
It's what happens when you get lawyers involved, and I will speak as an attorney that it's not uncommon in litigation to use the term confidentiality agreement. And I know nothing about this letter, but I certainly know a little bit about litigation. And whether it's a medical malpractice case, whether it's trade secrets, whether it's corporate or commercial litigation, confidentiality agreement or human resources, personnel matters, used every day in various contexts, specifically when it comes to trade secrets, materials that have been withheld, materials that have withheld by the court for due reason. So here's your confidentiality agreement 101 is basically my guess.
Or confidentiality order.
Yes.
There was items in the litigation that none of the members of the public and none of the board members could see, but the court had access to.
The court does an in-camera
So there is no
inspection to
secret
protect
agreement
those.
resolving the situation regarding odors between Baker Commodities and the town of Penfield.
Yeah. But I certainly understand why a layperson who didn't have to endure the bar exam like we did could take the term confidentiality agreement to mean what a layperson would interpret it to mean, to be something is confidential, something is secret. You look in the dictionary, that's what it means. But I'm guessing that's probably what transpired in the context of this litigation. However, the point is well taken and much more eloquent than what I was saying. I did indicate earlier, I have had residents, since this hit the news recently, say to me, are my tax dollars going to go to cure Steppenbecks? Because, why did these people move there? Some people didn't even know Steppenbecks was there. Perfectly understandable, especially given the history of an odor-free history. But I do have to, as an elected representative, listen to those people who are asking me or giving me input on how to spend their tax dollars. I don't think those same people, though, would have a problem or dispute the town partnering with the appropriate state agency and the Attorney General's office, if appropriate, and bringing the hammer down in that way. I would have confidence in doing that.
You still have the floor,
Yeah.
Jeff.
Well, I think as we established earlier, there is not grandfathering in terms of obeying the laws, though. So if somebody feels, though, that the town still needs to protect the people of that neighborhood, that's still the case, right?
Yes.
The last things I would say is just that it seems to me very clearly that what's happened up to this point, similar to what Mr. Healy had mentioned is that this problem has been approached subjectively often instead of objectively. And it seems like hard measurements need to be done, that there need to be ways of finding out, measuring exactly what it is there, and not to have this subjective he said, she said, or whatever, where Bob complains that it smells terrible up there, and Bill Schmieder, who's a very nice man, comes up and he says, I don't smell anything. That doesn't work. We need to have really objective measurements. So I really implore the town board to please do two things, to please do as much as you can with that neighborhood with their petition and follow what they're saying. I think the idea of having independent evaluation is a terrific idea, finding exactly what the pollutants are so that then we can address what the problem is. Please let the neighborhood help to select that independent evaluator. And finally, I'd say as an environmentalist, I've been a member of the Sierra Club for over 30 years. And I don't think anybody here has said that they want to see Baker Commodities close, and I don't either. I see a good role for Baker Commodities. It's a form of recycling. There's a lot of value in what they do there. I think everybody would like to see them succeed, but we'd like to see them do it in a clean way where we have clean air in the town. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. Fred? Good evening, Fred.
Good evening, Tony. My name is Fred Elliott. My wife, Marie, and I live at 219 Parkview Drive. She's lived there for over 30 years, so is well familiar with the whole sorry saga of Stop and Box and now Baker Commodities. And we do support the petition that was presented to the board tonight. And I'd like to address the issue of going to the state DEC versus going to the Penfield board. We come to the board because this is where we live. You're our first line of defense, if you will. You're the people that we depend on to help us out with local town matters, which is what we consider this to be. This is a local issue. It just so happens that, yes, the DEC does have some overriding authority because they issue the permit under which Baker's operates, but they operate in the town of Penfield. And we would think that the town board would like to see that its residents get their fair share of clean, fresh air. And if that means helping us resolve this issue with Baker Commodities, and that's what we'd like to see you do. Marie and I participated in the stakeholder meetings. As Tony knows, we went to as many of those as we could. We've tried to be objective about this whole issue as much as we can, but it's getting to the point now where we're not sure where to turn. We'd like to see more transparency in what takes place about this whole situation. For example, the meeting that was held last week, we realize that, yes, the town supervisor has many, many meetings during the course of a week with a wide variety of people, businesses, whatever, various town business. But in this particular instance, Mr. LaFountain and the board members are well aware of the neighborhood's concern about Baker Commodities. Several of us had emailed Tony and said, you know, we'd like to see somebody from the neighborhood included in your meeting with Baker, the DEC, and whoever else you were going to have there. I didn't get a reply to that. I don't know if anybody else did, but we weren't invited. And Tony, you said tonight, well, you know, I have a lot of meetings during the week. This is common for me to meet with people, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, it is. But in this one instance, it would have been nice to have a resident from the neighborhood at that particular meeting, knowing the high level of interest that exists among the residents about this particular issue. However, that's already taken place. We can't go back in time. What we're hoping for is what was already brought up tonight, is that we can have a meeting very soon between Baker, the DEC, Ashland, if that's appropriate, a representative or two from the neighborhood, and this odor expert that was mentioned in your email. Who is that person? Who, the odor expert?
I have not met that person, Fred. I don't have an answer for you.
Are they brought in by Baker or
I
who?
think they were brought in conjunction with Ashland and Baker. That's all I know. I
Okay,
don't
so
have-
it's not
I
really
don't-
an independent person, it's somebody,
You know.
yeah, I know you don't know, but to me, it sounds like, yeah, we'll bring somebody in that really understands where we're coming from. I tend to be a little cynical about that because I don't believe that Baker and Ashland are going to bring in somebody that's totally independent and can give the residents a fair and objective viewpoint about this. If it's somebody that's hired by Baker, if you're signing my paycheck, I'm going to lean towards you. So, but I would certainly hope that you can see your way to schedule a meeting with us, somebody from our group, and those other entities as soon as possible.
So certainly something for us to take a look at. One of the reason, as you're well aware, Fred, the reason we disbanded that meeting is, and it was agreed upon by everybody that was there but one person, and that was we got to a point that we were just nitpicking everything and accomplishing nothing, and the group agreed to disband from there. So, certainly, as we move forward, as we take a look at this, and you're talking about being objective, we have to be objective on all fronts.
That's true.
DEC, the town, the neighborhood, Baker Commodity.
It's just that for 9 years now, all those same players have gotten nowhere with this issue.
Right.
So we don't want it to take a back burner. We don't want it to just be forgotten about and say, well, things are getting a little better. Or DEC tells us, really, they're okay. That's not going to cut it for us. And we need to, I know we're going to keep pushing, if that's the right word, to get a resolution to this that's satisfactory to all parties. But if they did it once, if there were no odors, they can do it again. So something's changed there.
Right.
And they just keep saying, well, we're working on it. Well, I can't buy that. 9 years is a long time. They could have fixed it by now. So I guess that's it. Thank you.
Right. Thank you,
Fred,
Fred.
I just want to mention one other thing. In my experience, very rarely is there a 1-800 DEC hotline or 1-800 DOT hotline. So I'm glad that you are coming to the town board because we are the first line of defense. What I would say is when we say DEC, let's take DEC out of the equation. We need to talk to the state representatives. They're the entity that is going to reach out to DEC and interact with DEC. So I'm not expecting, nor am I suggesting that any resident try to navigate the bureaucracy of the DEC to have someone independently from Albany come down to Penfield, New York. That's what the state representatives are for, and that's some of my experience in a former life. So what I would suggest is, and I'll leave the logistics to Supervisor LaFountain, but as maybe these meetings proceed or begin to move forward, contacting the state representatives and having a representative from their office sit in the meeting. I have no love lost for the DEC as well, as Councilwoman Metzler said. But sitting as a town board member, we have to go by sort of the permits and the regulations that are set forth by DEC, similar to DOT. DOT has a whole list of reasons for putting a stop sign or a traffic light on a state road, and it may take 30 years to get a traffic light right over here at this intersection, but we have to work with DOT. So in similar fashion, we have to continue that partnership with DEC, which I know Supervisor LaFountain has mentioned we will continue to do, but at the same time, we need to bring in those other players. And again, I'm sorry for not having conveyed this better, more frequently, or at least earlier in my term in office, but I will say now that I will help reach out and facilitate some form of communication with the state elected officers to have someone from their offices sit in the room and help to work on this problem.
And, your point is well taken, and I'd be more than happy to talk to Mark Johns or Ted O'Brien. Like somebody mentioned, Ted's within walking distance of our neighborhood. I know Mark Johns through other organizations, so yeah, I'd be willing to talk with either one and ask them to get involved and participate in future meetings. But quite frankly, at least for me, my level of confidence in our state legislature
I can't
It's
argue
not
that.
very
I'm
good.
not going to argue with that.
You know,
can't
I
argue
mean,
that.
and I don't think anybody here is going to argue about that. I mean,
Especially
you know, they're
the
rated as
assembly.
one of the most dysfunctional in the country, if not the most dysfunctional. And did I just say that on TV? But yeah, certainly they can be approached, and we can ask them to get involved and take a look at it and see what they can do. I don't see that as a problem. But I just don't want us to feel that, okay, we're going to get the state involved, we can, you know, we can ease off here.
We don't have faith
That's
in
not
that.
what we want. You know, we want.
And I can say also as well that it's part of that larger picture of getting our fair share in this part of the state and in this town, in our municipality. That's what our state representatives are fighting for. Particularly Mark Johns, you'll see in some of the issues he brings before his legislative body. About one of his proposals was that each legislator should be able to bring a bill to vote every year, no matter what, to get that fair share, to get that voice in Albany that we're not getting right now and haven't under the current leadership.
Right.
So that being said, that's another avenue by which we can assist our residents, pressing upon our elected officials in the state, because there are representatives as well, to say we need our fair share of DEC enforcement, because obviously we're not getting it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Good to see you. Yes, sir, you were next, and then after Steve, we'll get through everybody. We'll get through everybody just, and then we'll go into our second round. Good evening.
Stephen Siegel, 14 Old Westfall Drive. We've been in the neighborhood about 10 years now, and just want to sort of underscore that down at our end of Old Westfall, the problems over the past 6 months have become more frequent and significantly more intense. So you've heard that already. You've heard it again. Secondly, to me, this is an engineering problem, and there's an engineering solution to it. And I would have to believe that there are environmental air quality consultants out there who specialize in this sort of thing, who in short order can come into the neighborhood and analyze what's going on. Folks who are familiar with various industrial processes and deal with all sorts of environmental mitigation of air quality related issues. Consistent with the petition that's been presented, it doesn't cost anything to speak to some of these folks and get some proposals and ask how they would approach such a problem. How would they monitor the situation in the neighborhood? And what would their proposal be for a series of steps to monitor, analyze, and then provide recommendations? It may be that nothing more is required than some type of monitoring activity in the neighborhood. If we're monitoring the situation and Baker's aware that it's being monitored, that may be enough to bring everything into compliance. If Baker is a willing participant, then they should embrace bringing an independent third party in and could possibly help with the selection. But there are folks out there who specialize in this, and I'm sure that in very short order, this can be quantified with thresholds evaluated and set from an engineering standpoint for the various materials that are causing these problems, so that then there's a baseline to move forward from in an objective way, rather than just the number of folks who feel like complaining on any particular day because it was bad enough. We happened to complain the first time officially because my kid came in on his way to the bus stop and said, "Man, Baker Commodities is horrible today." And I walked outside, and sure enough, he was right. I mean, it's, like Lydia said, it's got a name in our house too, and even my 12-year-old son is well attuned to it. But again, there's lots of people out who specialize in this sort of thing, and it doesn't hurt to have conversations. It doesn't cost to have conversations and solicit proposals, and just understand what the cost parameters are and what the options are for tackling this on the analysis side as well as the mitigation side.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate it. Thank you. Other first-time speakers? Seeing none. Steve Healy?
So, Paula, you've reiterated a few times that you've heard from people saying, you know, why are you going to waste taxpayers' money on solving this problem? That's their problem. They moved in there, okay? Lydia moved in. She didn't know Baker was there. My family moved in 2002. We didn't know Baker was there. And for 3 years, we smelled nothing, right? So what I would suggest to those people is that we send them a dead, ripe raccoon, put it in the middle of their dinner table, and let them eat dinner, okay? So Think about that. Everybody, think about that.
Yeah, and I certainly said it was not my opinion, but it certainly
I know it's
came
not
out
your opinion, but
quite-
it really, it kind of torques me to hear people say that.
But the same thing is said about other pre-existing conditions,
Right.
as well. The same people who will say something about the gun club or about a farm or.
Yeah, well,
So
noise
it's-
is one thing in a gun club, right? You're not breathing noise. We're breathing this stuff. And it's not just a nuisance odor, it's a nauseating, noxious stench. It's a problem. And there's probably emissions and chemicals within those emissions that are not healthy. I would like to see some emissions testing done there. I really would.
Thank you, Steve.
Yep.
Other second-time speakers? Dr. Lovelace, do I see?
To Mrs. Metzler, I can understand people would approach every one of you about not their taxes being used on this problem because they feel that, well, this was a pre-existing problem dating back 100 years. Fortunately, I'm only 67. I'm not familiar with the history of Penfield going back 100 years. We moved into the area, we didn't know about it. And now it's become something we've lived with. I would hope that the people who are saying not my dollars, not my tax to be expended towards mitigating any problem that these residents have, never have a problem where they have to call upon their fellow citizenry to join behind them in their efforts to have controls made on something that's violating their rights to life, liberty, and happiness in their homes. I just think it is through the media being here, having interviewed many of our residents, this is going out to wider groups of people outside the town of Penfield and engendering response that why should they have to put up with this? We're coming to you for help. And I understand that it may take tax dollars. But I'm not coming up here to ask what you spend all my tax dollars on, whether you're out listening to somebody about the gun clubs. You're wasting my tax dollars listening to them. I want you to listen to those people. If they've got a valid complaint, I want you to do what's in your power to do. If somebody's complaining about the Burger King putting out odors, do what you can. Residues, do what you can. I know, having watched you on various nights, heaven help you if you want to put a sign in that's 3 inches too big or has too much color or the letters are too big. You're jumping down their throats. We're just asking for some help, and we appreciate what you do. And we want you to help everyone in the community as best you can. And if they need our help, have them come here to this forum and ask as we're asking for yours and their help. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Other comments? Baker or any other items? Okay. Seeing no one else at this time, then we'll continue on with our agenda. We'll move back on the agenda to communications and announcements. Thank everyone for coming tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move on to communications and announcements, and I would turn the podium over to Councilman Quinn.
Thank you,
to begin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. The New York State's Citizen Preparedness Training Program for Rochester will be held on Saturday, July 26th at noon. This program will be held at the Wegman Napier Gym at the Aquinas Institute of Rochester, located at 1127 Dewey Avenue. The Citizen Preparedness Corps give residents the tools and resources to prepare for any type of disaster, respond accordingly, and recover as quickly as possible to pre-disaster conditions. Trainings will be led by the New York National Guard, working with experts from the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services Office of Emergency Management and Office of Fire Prevention and Control. The training course will provide an introduction to responding to natural or man-made disasters. Participants will be advised on how to properly prepare for any disaster, including developing a family emergency plan and stocking up on emergency supplies. All participants must register in advance at www.prepare.ny.gov. Second, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation is reminding New Yorkers not to use lawn fertilizers that contain phosphorus. The dishwasher detergent and nutrient runoff law prohibits the use of phosphorus fertilizers unless a new lawn is being established or a soil tests show that the lawn does not have enough phosphorus. For complete details of the New York State dishwasher detergent and nutrient runoff law, along with frequently asked questions, please visit www.dec.ny.gov. And lastly, I would like to wish my daughter May a happy 6th birthday, which is today. I'm hoping she's in bed at this hour, but you never know.
I'm hoping she's watching.
She could be watching
Could be a
Frozen
long day
for the
Eating M&Ms.
Yeah, she could be watching Frozen for the 50th time. I'm not sure. So those are my announcements.
Mrs. Metzler.
I have two announcements this evening. The first is an announcement from probably our Watershed Management Committee, of which I'm proud to sit on with several residents who volunteer their time. Here are a few good tips for our residents to improve drainage on our upcoming rainy days, although I think we've already had some as well. Please keep your gutters and downspouts clean. Look at your driveway pipes, culverts, and catch basins to make sure they're kept clear of yard waste or garbage. Get your rake out and remove anything that has a potential for clogging up a system. Swales should be kept clear to allow water to drain. For more information and links to drainage and water management, please visit the town website at penfield.org. The Penfield Players announces its summer stage reading of Why Torture is Wrong and the People Who Love Them on Saturday, July 19 at 2 p.m. at the Penfield Community Center. Christopher Durang turns political humor upside down with his raucous and provocative satire about America's growing homeland insecurity. Directed by Jared Lee Morgan, Why Torture is Wrong and the People Who Love Them tells the story of a young woman suddenly in crisis. A stage reading is a style of theater in which the actors, rather than memorizing lines, interpret them while holding the scripts. Like storytelling, staged readings can create images by suggestion that could never be realistically portrayed on a stage. Readers' theater frees audiences from the physical limitations of conventional theater, letting imaginations soar. Admission is free, but donations are accepted. For more information on this event, please visit www.penfieldplayers.org. That's all I have for this evening.
Thank you. Just one quick item. Recently, I participated in the groundbreaking ceremony for the YMCA, the Eastside YMCA, as they embark on their 33,000+ square foot addition to support not only all of their members, but it's in conjunction with the University of Rochester Medical Center to better serve the community for overall fitness and recovery from any chronic illness and injuries and other wellness programs. Their goal is to be open spring of 2015, and for more information you can log on at rochesterymca.org/Eastside Expansion for further details. Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Real quickly, one announcement. The Penfield Trails Committee will sponsor a free guided hike at Monroe County's Ellison Park on Saturday, August 9th from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Discover the offbeat pathways in the 447-acre Ellison Park. You will see natural vistas covered by the 10,000 years of Irondequoit Creek flow. This guided hike will drop steeply down Coyote Den Trail into a more familiar section of Ellison Park. A side trail will lead to a scenic overlook. Participants should meet at the south entrance to the park at 1008 Penfield Road. Look for the hike signs. The hike is free, but participants are asked to pre-register at the Penfield Recreation Department at 340-8655, option 6, so they know who will be attending. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mrs. Cole?
I have 3 announcements, 2 relating to the recreation programs. Midsummer's Night's Dream Dinner in the Woods is a fundraiser for the daytime education and recreation program, the DEER program. Penfield Recreation will hold the second themed dinner fundraiser for the DEER program on Wednesday, August 13th at 6 p.m. A Midsummer's Night's Dream Dinner in the Woods will bring the fairy world of William Shakespeare to life in a secret location for a magical dinner in the woods. A map with trail directions will be sent to you. The evening will be included a scavenger hunt through the ferry trails, live music, delicious cool summer feast prepared by local farm fresh organic food, and an abridged progressive 15-minute performance of the timeless classic as you journey through the woods. A limited number of tickets are available in the Penfield Recreation Department. Tickets are $40 and can be purchased by the Penfield Recreation Department or by calling 340-8655 or online at penfieldrec.org. My second announcement is that the Penfield Annual Summer Concert Music Series at the Penfield Amphitheater Kiwanis Stage has begun with Cool Jazz Tuesdays that started last night. The next concert will be Dan Schmidt and the Shadows on July 22nd, Rochester Metropolitan Jazz Orchestra on July 29th, and Mark Cassera on August 5th. Kids Fest Thursdays will begin tomorrow night, Thursday, July 17th, with the Dady Brothers, followed by Mike Cornish on the July 24th, the Dinner Dogs on July 31st, and finally the Hill Brothers on August 7th. We will feature 2 Saturday concerts in August for the Saturdays on Stage series. Saturday, August 2nd will be Get Mangioni's new big band, and August 9th will be Mr. Mustard's Beatle Review, and After It's My Party opens the show at 5 p.m. All concerts begin at 7 p.m., unless otherwise noted, and are held in the Penfield Amphitheater Kiwanis Stage, located in Veterans Memorial Park. Food is available for purchase at each of the concerts. For more details on the Summer Amphitheater Music Series, visit penfieldrec.org. And my third announcement is that I had my last community chat last night in July, and my next one for August will be Tuesday, August 19th from 5:30 to 7 in the new book area at the Penfield Library, if you'd like to come and talk about any subject or anything about Penfield. Last night, someone came and we talked a lot about the mixed use and what's happening down at Manitou Lake. Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Horwitz, any communications or announcements?
Nothing tonight, Mr. Supervisor.
Okay, thank you very much. Move on to additions and deletions to the agenda. Any additions or deletions? Seeing none, we'll move on to approval of the minutes. We have our June 18th, 2014 minutes before us. I would entertain a motion of approval for those minutes.
I'd like to move that the June 18th minutes be approved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on those minutes? Seeing none, I'd ask for a roll call vote, please.
Cole.
Aye.
LaFountain.
Aye.
Metzler.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Quinn.
Aye.
5 ayes.
Thank you very much. Petitions, since the last time the board has gotten together, has, with the exception of the petition that was turned in this evening from the residents up on Parkview Drive for Baker Commodities, has the board, town clerk, or town attorney received any additional petitions? Okay, seeing none. At this point, I'm going to call for a 5-minute recess of the board. So I'll just ask our friends PCTV that will take about 5 minutes, and then we'll be back on the air, and I'll give you plenty of time so that we make sure that we have a continuation of this meeting. Thank you. Thank you. Reconvene the town board meeting from July 16, 2014. The town board took a short recess. We're back. We're at a point, we've completed all of our agenda with the exception of resolutions by function. And before we move on, I would just recognize Councilman Moore, please.
Mr. LaFountain, thank you. I'd like to make a motion tonight to remove from the agenda items or resolutions 14T-134 and resolution 14T-135. Thank you.
Second that.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to withdraw those two. So that's so noted. We'll continue on, and we'll start with Resolution 132 under Law and Finance, please.
Setting a public hearing to consider incentive zoning for a conditional use permit and re-subdivision approval and preliminary overall site plan approval to allow 3 structures totaling 15,080 square feet and final site plan approval to allow the proposed 6,000 square foot structure at 2146 and 2152 Fairport 9 Mile Point Road.
Moved.
Second.
Whereas an application has been received by the Penfield Town Board under Local Law Number 2 of 2003, known as the Town of Penfield Incentive Zoning Law, to consider the application for incentive zoning and preliminary and final re-subdivision approval, preliminary overall site plan approval for the development of 3 structures of 4,080 square feet, 5,000 square feet, and 6,000 square feet, totaling 15,080 square feet on 2.1 acres, and final site plan approval under Article 11-9-2, and a conditional use permit under Article 10-10-4-E of the code to allow a 6,000 square foot structure in the business non-retail zoning district at 2146 and 2152 Fairport 9 Mile Point Road. Now therefore be it resolved that the Town Board of the Town of Penfield will hold a public hearing at the Penfield Town Hall on August 6, 2014 at 7:30 p.m. on said date to consider the application and to hear all persons on the question of consideration of said application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Discussion on this resolution? Seeing no discussion, I'd ask for a roll call vote, please.
Cole. Aye. LaFountain.
Aye.
Metzler. Aye. Moore.
Aye.
Quinn.
Aye.
5 ayes. Setting a public hearing for a conditional use permit and preliminary and final re-subdivision and site plan approval to allow the demolition of the structures at 2107 and 2111 5 Mile Line Road to permit the construction of a 3,490 square foot structure for Mark's Pizzeria at 2107 and 2111 5 Mile Line Road with outdoor dining at 1816 Penfield Road.
Moved.
Second.
Whereas an application has been received by the Penfield Town Board for the issuance of a conditional use permit and preliminary and final re-subdivision and site plan approval pursuant to Article 3-3-97, Article 8-8-2, and Article 9-9-2 of the Code to allow the demolition of the structures at 2107 and 2111 5 Mile Line Road to permit the construction of a 3,490 square foot structure for Mark's Pizzeria at 2107 and 211 5 Mile Line Road, and with outdoor dining at 1816 Penfield Road in the Four Corners zoning district. Now therefore be it resolved that the Town Board of the Town of Penfield shall hold a public hearing at the Penfield Town Hall on August 6, 2014 at 7:30 p.m. on said date to consider the said application and to hear all persons interested on the question of the issuance of this conditional use permit and preliminary and final re-subdivision and site plan approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Again, discussion on this resolution? Seeing none, I'd ask for a roll call vote, please.
Cole. Aye. LaFountain.
Aye.
Metzler. Aye. Moore.
Aye.
Quinn.
Aye.
5 ayes. Granting approval to allow a garage addition with less side setback than permitted at 1740 Penfield Road.
Moved.
Second.
Whereas an application has been received by the Penfield Town Board pursuant to Article 3-3-101-C of the Code to consider permitting an addition to a garage with less side setback than permitted at 1740 Penfield Road. Whereas the Town Board of the Town of Penfield held a public hearing at the Penfield Town Hall on July 2, 2014 at 7:30 p.m. to consider the said application and to hear all persons interested on the question of permitting the addition to the garage. Now therefore be it resolved that the applicant's request to allow a garage addition with less side setback than permitted at 1740 Penfield Road is hereby granted, subject to the following conditions. For the record, Mr. Supervisor, there's roughly 9 conditions. All of them we've seen before in applications similar to this and are consistent with the Four Corners zoning district. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion on this resolution? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Cole. Aye. LaFountain.
Aye.
Metzler. Aye. Moore.
Aye.
Quinn.
Aye.
5 ayes. Authorization for the supervisor to sign recreation contracts.
So moved.
Second.
This authorizes the town supervisor to sign 16 recreation contracts. They're dealing with the summer programs, including a number of camp instructors for boys soccer and for volleyball.
Okay, thank you. Discussion on this resolution? Seeing none, a roll call vote, please.
Cole.
Aye.
LaFountain.
Aye.
Metzler. Aye. Moore.
Aye.
Quinn.
Aye.
5 ayes.
All right, thank you. That brings us to old business. Is there any old business to come before the board this evening? Seeing none. Is there any new business to come before the board this evening? Again, seeing none. Our second public participation session for the board, you can do that here in the audience. You can call in at 340-8771, or you can log on at penfield.org. Does anyone like to address the board on any matter? Okay, seeing none. One last comment that I want to just make. Last evening, I had an opportunity to come together with the Webster School District, Town of Webster Supervisor, Village of Webster Mayor, County Legislator, as we recognized and put together a proclamation for Teddy Coffey. Teddy is So You Think You Can Dance contestant, and so tonight's a big night for him. We wish him all the best, and you certainly have an opportunity to vote for one of our own local, lives in Penfield, goes to the Webster schools, and you can vote at fox.com/dance. And good luck to Teddy Coffey as he continues on his journey, So You Think You Can Dance. Seeing no other business to come before the board, this meeting is adjourned. I'd like to thank everyone that participated tonight, and also Penfield TV. Thank you.